Hey, beautiful sisters. My name's Donna Raymond and I am based in Kuranda, North Queensland, Australia. I am aware that most of you are based in the United States, and I just wanted to kind of chime in on this request for counsel regarding manipulation and abuse. Um, this is a very intimate subject for me as I've just kind of journeyed through the last 8 months, really processing as my marriage for me had come to completion as a learning experience, and the learning experience for me was based around mental health and also psychological abuse that I was unaware of. Um, just to add into this discussion, I've been reading the threads and I am really blessed to be able to share this space with some really amazing women, and the wisdom that's coming through is really beautiful. And I just love the fact that each and every one of you is encouraging these stories to come out and creating that safe space to share. And it's from these stories that we can live vicariously through other people and to also change our own stories. So there's much medicine in sharing the story, but also in letting the story go. And for me, I find that there's a collective thread that comes back from ancestral wounds through her story. And more and more, I don't know if it's just because my vocabulary for experiencing this reality has changed, but I'm starting to see this common theme, which is to do with manipulation, abuse, and narcissism as well. And I am having women coming to me seeking counsel out of the woodwork, and it's this similar thread. So I kind of feel that there's a purging happening, this coming up from the undercurrents of the collective, and it's here to be addressed and to be healed. And it's almost in a sense of the collective shadow. So I really want to kind of add to this discussion in my own personal view of what I take from this, and that is really reclaiming your own power and your responsibility as woman to hold space for other women and to hold space for the brothers as well, the men. And for me, when I tune into this discussion of, how do we heal this? How do we protect other people? And yeah, when I tune in really deeply into my womb, it's not about having to change or, that the brothers have to step up and do this. My approach and what comes through really clearly for me is teach the women and teach the sons and the daughters. Teach the women what is abuse. We need to define these terms so that we can be clear. If you don't know what abuse is in its textbook way that it's written, you don't know what to look for. And I've had this experience personally. I've undergone 4 years of intensity and just really doubting and second guessing myself, and all the time turning it back in on myself, because I'm the type of person that scans what are my patterns, what are my beliefs, constructs, how am I participating in creating this story, owning my own shit constantly. And I was unaware of what abuse was, different forms of abuse, and how manipulation can come into play. And that was a journey, an initiation into me becoming empowered and embodying my own freedom, being liberated from my own sense of suffering, and in really stepping into and embodying my power. And what I have come to realize and what I share with other men and women is that, particularly if you're an empath, is understanding the dynamic of what happens with your particular archetype. I work with archetypes. So for me, on a higher level, I work within the priestess realms and the wise woman. The wise woman is the grand archetype that I am aligned to, and she calls me forward, which is, in a sense, my elder self, my ancestor self calls me forward. But there's other archetypes on a psychological level that I operate these patterns as well, and that is the people pleaser, the fix it, and the rescuer mentality. So I have learned that I have porous boundaries that I'm working on now. I've identified them, and I am finding those ways to heal and integrate that part of myself as well, to be more mindful of how I choose to interact with other people and really coming into myself more fully. So, just to share a little story on how I came to be on this path, it was actually through my work, through facilitating women's circles. I had one woman come in through a red tent activation ceremony that went for a whole day. And yeah, this particular woman created a lot of unnecessary drama. Like, it was pretty full on, and it triggered a lot of women in this safe and sacred place. And as a facilitator, I just kind of sat back and I watched and I observed and absorbed what I could at the time without needing to act. It didn't come to a level where this woman needed to be told that she had to leave, that it was the time for her to go. So she was disrupting the space with her energy, but the sisterhood kind of gathered around and transmuted that energy, and it was really, really beautiful. And I was so proud of the women that were there that day and the way that they held space for this other woman to be able to offload her trauma and her pain and her schisms mentally, and that it was held and the energy was kind of transmuted. But 3 days later, I was still clearing the energy from my space. And what it really showed to me was embodying a deeper sense of maturity as a facilitator, and also the need for me stepping into this work fully and really embodying what it means to be an anchor, holding sacred space for other people, was that I needed to be mindful of who I was allowing into that space and what energy. And I needed to understand a new vocabulary of how to scan these people, because I didn't want to allow predators into this space that I was facilitating and holding for other women and men, because I do group work as well, to be vulnerable. And where there's vulnerability, you will find the energetic counterpart, which is the predator archetype, where the manipulation comes in. So I started researching sociopathy, and that was the kind of buzzword that I had in my naivety, and that's where I started. And this was over a year, maybe a year and a half ago. And it was a slow journey. And the more I kind of delved into the psychological realms and these archetypes that people embody, psychological archetypes, I was kind of blown away. And it's one of those things that language shapes form, it shapes your reality. Okay, so education is the key. For me, I started to look at sociopathy was the first anchor point for me in my education and exploring a new way of looking at the world. And then it went on to learning about narcissism. And when I started to look at narcissism, I was like, holy fuck, this is my life right now. This is my marriage. Wow, okay. I'm not labeling it fully, but I'm really aware of these red flags for me. And it's like, just looking, scanning. Then I started to look into researching what abuse was and the different forms of abuse. What's psychological abuse? What's physical abuse? And defining those terms so that I could be clear with whatever I was experiencing or what I was hearing or what I was seeing or what I was tuning into in my body. Because I've also journeyed in cultivating my body to be able to provide sensory information of this reality. And then it kind of went even further to exploring different personality disorders, mental health, and then how the brain works, which I'm really fascinated with anyway, but in the context of neuro-linguistic programming as well, which talks about different filters, that we have what's called these meta-filters, which absorb and process and extract information from our environment to a particular narrative. And this is really interesting and it's key, because if you're running a particular belief or an ideology or discourse that you've grown up with, you're going to keep retrieving information that supports those beliefs. So, if you're looking at a potential abuser and you're in defense mode, you're going to keep extracting information that's going to defend that character. And it's a really interesting journey to start to look at these constructs and these filters in our mind, and to also come back into a more healthy state of being and mental clarity as well. I started researching gaslighting, hoovering tactics, all these different type of tactics of manipulation, so that I could be mindful and that I could see them when they were in play. And it's like, if you look at this sense of abuse and manipulation as a game, a broad term, you need to be aware of the rules of the game and the dance, the energetic dance, so that you can choose whether you want to play or not. Because there is a trickster archetype which runs through men and women, and it comes through the unconscious as well. Another thing that I've learned is that it's becoming more fully realized is the subconscious never sleeps. Our unconscious mind, it's absorbing, I think they say it's debatable, around 100 to 1,000 parts of information per minute, where the conscious brain only filters through and absorbs 7. So if you kind of get that niggly feeling that something's off, take a breath, step back, and find the moment to really tune into your body, into your womb. And you can actually train your mind to go into story, go into memory, and extract bits of information that feel off. And that's the beauty of really working with the subconscious, is using your conscious mind to map it and to go in to retrieve information that in the moment you might not have picked up on. But the more you bring your awareness into this part of yourself, the more that you can come into your sense of empowerment and really seeing things for what they are, not what you wish they were. Biggest slap in the face, wake up call for me, and was really owning my own shit, was that I have a tendency to focus on the dreaming and, the story and all the elaborate words and this image and the mask that's created, right? And not really looking at the actions, because talk is cheap, yeah? So when you're dealing with somebody that you feel or think something's a little bit off kilter, really start to look at their actions and ask questions. If you're unsure about a particular person, whether it's a man or a woman, ask questions around and do your own reality checks as well. If you have somebody that's in your ear telling you that you are this, you are this, you are this, and you start to believe them, start checking in with other people around and to just see if maybe that's not true, that this is a projection, or this person is casting an illusion around you to take away your power because you believe in this story that they're shaping around you. Just a resource that was really, really handy for me, that fucking really allowed me to bring me back into a more sense of mental clarity, because it got really foggy for me for a while, was the Spartan Life Coach on YouTube. And he's a martial arts practitioner that's just started this life coaching business, and originally it was for men and to kind of empower men, but more and more he's starting to see that women are seeking him for his work because of his intimate journey with narcissistic abuse and psychological abuse as well. And yeah, he's really funny and down to earth, and I thoroughly recommend just tuning in. And he has different techniques, and also allows you to shape a new vocabulary to be able to see things a little bit more clearly. For me, I've grown up and matured so much in this last year that it's fucking ridiculous, but I'm also so grateful for it. And what's allowed me to soften into knowing what I know now, and also knowing that there are people out there in the world that are operating blindly in the form of being the manipulator or the abuser and being the abused or the victim, is that there's medicine in that, and the role for women in these sacred spaces that we create for one another is to support and to educate. And also that there is a time and place to go into story, And there also comes a time where story's not conducive for growth anymore, and that's where it's coming into letting go of the story. A lot of the work that I've been doing one-on-one with women going into the rooms is really letting go of the story and letting go of the different archetypes that women have anchored into, whether it's in this lifetime or this collective thread which is coming from this feminine experience, because we all have anchors into her story as well. And knowing that you have the power, you really do have the power to come into your body more holistically and more fully, and choosing what you wish to align to and what you wish to attract into your world. A lot of that comes from doing the shadow work, is going really deep into the negative, what we perceive as the negative aspects of ourselves, and starting to refine our own blueprint and imprints as to why. Why do you attract this? Why is this happening to you? What is the medicine here? It's all a learning experience, and to kind of separate from the emotion and the story and to just come back into mapping it on a psychological platform. So for me, I've gone right into my childhood. So your childhood, the first formative years, is your imprint for what love is, for what your experience of love is. So if your first experiences is abuse, you might not know that that's abuse, because as a child you perceive it as your language for love, and that's what you anchor to. That's what's normal and healthy for you. So you will find comfort in these experiences because it's natural for you. It's a natural state. So contrast is key, and this is where sharing stories comes in. Yes, we can share the fucked up stories and all the trauma and the abuse, but we need women to stand up and to share empowered stories, and stories about journeying with men that are so supportive and are healthy, to create this platform, this benchmark of what is health. Because if you don't know that, you're going to feel that what you're experiencing is normal and is healthy. It's like you don't know the amount of tension you can carry in your body until you get some body work, until you put your awareness onto that muscle, because the body is built to adapt. The brain is fucking amazing at how it can adapt to trauma and abuse, whether that's through the form of compartmentalization, where it stores that into the deep recesses of your mind so that you can still function, or that it creates splits in personalities or creates masks in how you present yourself to the world. And it's really having these reference points and this contrast. Contrast can be key because we're in this dualistic experience of what is healthy, and refining and defining the benchmark for health. And that's where I kind of approach this issue from, based on having my own personal experience and coming through the healing side of that, and everything that it's entailed, and all the shit and the stories and everything. It's been pretty mythic and intense, and also knowing that what came through from my womb up into my heart that I now share and I work with is the ability to stand back and to take a deep breath and not my story, not my story, not my story. When I feel things come in and that it's this stories dancing around, this victim, you did this, blah, 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 this person, whatever, it's taking me away from my center and my ability to create and to be strong and grounded in the world. You know, I'm all for being aware of what we perceive as the negative, to finding pathways to transmute, integrate, to heal that shadow aspect, and to then align to the positive. I'm not the type of person that's just going to turn the other cheek anymore. So I do understand the call for finding pathways to allow these men to be accountable. But in all honesty, if you're dealing with this psychological construct of what narcissism is, and the fact that our culture, this capitalistic, consumeristic culture, is breeding apathy, it's breeding narcissism, it's breeding sociopathy and psychopathy as well. And that's a very real fact. The DSM, which is a diagnostic manual for personality disorders, has actually taken narcissism out of it because it's so commonplace now. That's a reality that we are facing in the world that we live in. And for me, the drive to work on the level that I work on, which is in the kind of more darker realms, that most people are afraid to go into, the real subconscious and emotional planes, is I have 2 daughters. And it's my duty as an ancestor and their mother to create and hold space for the world that I wish for them to journey into, and actively participating in doing the work now. And I'm stepping up and I'm showing up every day and I'm doing fucking hard yards. And it is challenging work, but there's so much magic in it, and there's so much beauty in it as well. Yeah, I don't know where else I can go with this without making the video go for an hour, but I'm all for opening up this discussion as well on ways that we can create the support and building the language for women and men as well to start to see the world in a different light. And also not to be scared or to be fearful to trust again. It's been a big journey for me. Psychological abuse for me is one of the worst forms of abuse because it compounds over time and it's subtle and it increases little bit by little bit before, you get so foggy and disassociated with your own equilibrium and your balance and your sense of self that it becomes hard to see. But the illusions and the hooks cast around everywhere is really challenging, and that's where the support of the sisterhood and these circles, this sacred space women have always gathered, always, is really so beautiful. It's such a gift, whether it's in real time, whether you have the privilege. For me, I have an actual sacred space. Just what I'm working on at the moment is my womb temple to allow women to come to sit and to be, but just to have an online platform to be able to reach out and to share stories is such an amazing space. And I also encourage women to share videos too. There's much that can be gathered from listening to story and the way that it's spoken. There's so much is lost in translation in text as well, and being able to see and to feel somebody's heart coming through is a really precious gift as well, to be able to cultivate a deeper support network as well, and to also know that we're all here on our own journey and we're all at different stages. And the beautiful part about having these sacred spaces is to provide that level of encouragement, that things do get better. And I really what comes through my magic is that women are to birth this new paradigm. We're the womb bearers. We bear life and creation energy in our wombs, and it's tapping into this space to be able to clear these pathways for the future generations. And that's why this purge is happening now, because the consciousness is at a level that we can do this, and we're doing it, and it's happening. There's always the greatest darkness before the light. So it's going through the muck, seeing it, owning that part of ourselves that is expressing itself unconsciously in the world, and pulling all those threads in and reclaiming that part of ourselves as well, and healing and integrating that shadow part so that we are more conscious and in alignment with what we are actually creating in the world. So, many blessings. I hope that wasn't too much of a rant, and I hope you all have a beautiful evening, beautiful day wherever you're at in the world, and sending you so much love and blessings, strength, support, nurturing, and everything else that you need to flourish and to thrive in a really beautiful expression of yourself in authenticity, and liberating yourself from suffering and from the story. Mwah.